The dyno will hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
You've got this conglomeration of parts that you put together. You may learn that some of them just don't work well together.
Yeah.
And if you spent any time on a dyno or any time building cars, it's like you could either chase it and it's going to cost you a fortune, or you can correct the problem.
Welcome back to another episode on Modify with TrickFactory Customs. I forgot the name of our podcast for 1 second, but we're a custom shop based here in British Columbia, Canada, and we talk about modified cars. We offend people with idea or thoughts that we have.
Not by intent.
Oftentimes,
We don't
No,
go
I
on the road
don't.
for it.
Don't make it seem like we're going out to offend people.
I'm not trying.
I know it just
Expressing
happens.
our opinions.
Heartfelt emotions, but
It's a one-way street, though. I'm currently in a conversation with somebody that doesn't necessarily appreciate my opinion, and now he's upset that I don't agree with his opinion. So he's like, if you don't like it, just keep walking. I was like, well, you didn't keep walking. You commented,
on
it.
it. You started this.
So you started this. You didn't need to. You could just keep walking.
Yes. And so on this episode, we are going to be talking about tuners or tuning. All about that because Tim just recently had a dyno appointment and or a dyno experience with his car. And if you do not know, he has a very high horsepower Mercedes 190E. It's a twin turbo LS. The bottom end can make 2,000 horsepower. But in the time that he's owned that, he hasn't gotten the ability, or he hasn't gotten the chance to actually like rip. I mean, you've driven it a few times, but yeah, we're going to talk about
Not to its fullest potential. Because it has been driven, it has been ripped.
Yeah.
It's laid down some serious rubber on the roads.
Yes. But you went for tuning, or you went to have your car tuned because it was, what did you have in it before? Was it just a
basic tune?
Okay. And so, yeah, it was an interesting experience, and it was filled with emotions and tears. Not tears, but we're gonna
I wouldn't say tears, but it's
Not
definitely
tears.
a kick in the nuts.
Yes. And so we're going to talk about just dynoing things, or like the whole tuning process. And so it's going to be a little bit technical, but not really. It's going to be more because you've had cars blow up on the dyno
Yeah,
as
it's
well.
pretty common. That's why
Yes.
they make you sign a waiver.
Sick. So we're going to all talk about that. We're going to talk about good tuners, bad tuners, all of that. And I guess how you can navigate if you ever want to get your car tuned. What you need to know to get your car tuned and dynoed, and things. Just things you should know so you don't blow up your car, pretty much. Right. So with that said, let's get started. So how has the week been? What's been happening?
We're cleaning house right now.
Yes.
We
Getting
are
rid of people's leftover bits and dead projects. And
Yeah, because you started a TrickFactory swap meet. Is that the name of the Instagram page?
yeah, TrickFactory swap meet.
Yeah, So if you want to check it out, TrickFactory swap meet. That's where we're putting all the things that we're cleaning house.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
There's lots of new stuff, lots of used stuff, lots of takeoff stuff.
Yes.
It's a bit of a process. So, and if it's up there, it's still for sale.
Yeah. So I mean, we've been in business now for coming on 20 some odd years. I don't want to say
Almost 20 years.
It's a thing, right? So we have a lot of takeoff things. We have a lot of things that at one point in time we thought were treasure. We had to keep these things. We had grand visions for projects that we wanted to do. So we saved a whole bunch of stuff. And we're in a point right now where we're just kind of
Trying to get our space back.
There's some stuff from like classic cars, but there's also some stuff from modern stuff. Like you're getting rid of Lamborghini seats, I saw.
That's right.
And so, Lamborghini Urus seats, so you can.
No, we're not putting them in the Euro. If
No,
you
we're
check
not.
out the page and see what they cost, that's why we're not.
Yeah, they are extremely expensive. So we got a seat sponsor. So for our Euroho project, which is, if you're listening for the first time or you're new to this, our Lamborghini Urus Chevy Tahoe body swap project, chassis swap project. And
Which was the first evolution of cleaning up things that had been sitting around forever. So that's how that inception of that project even happened.
That's exactly right. So it was an accumulation of parts that we just been collecting.
Yeah. I guess we're also selling some cars too, right? The 190.
Well, there's
a 190.
There's a 190E on there. And no, it's not the Evil Evo.
So, no, that's not for sale.
Or a 2516. So it's not one of those
not
either.
For sale. No,
but still a 190. It's a good project car for anybody. So
check it out on Instagram.
On
check it out. TrickFactory Swap Meet on Instagram. And then this week as well, speaking of 190s, we've also been working on the 190.
Yep, the 2.516 is finished paint. It's in final assembly. So hopefully we're waiting on a few parts for it, but should be going home soon.
Oh,
back to Ireland.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's not gonna go together with the car it came with because there were two.
No, we're gonna send it home in advance. Okay. They came together, but that one's gonna go home. He can start driving that one, and then we're gonna get deep into the other one. So
yeah, because the other one is kind of like a version or a slight variation of the Evil Evo. That's what he intended. So. But it has the supercharged M113 engine, and we're reinventing a few of the things that we learned along the way during the Evil Evo. And yeah, that one's coming up next. But coming back around full circles, we need more space.
Yes.
So we got to get into it, so we're cleaning house.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, we're just going to dive right into the topic of conversation, which is dyno or dyno/tuning, all of that stuff. And again, this is very fresh on our minds because Tim, you just tuned your car.
No.
or no,
not tuned my car.
Okay, so just walk us through everything. First of all, because I'm looking at it from people that might not have listened to us before, and so if you're listening for the first time or you're new, welcome. Yes. So what is your car? And just tell us the spark notes about it. Yeah.
My car is a 1990 Mercedes 190E that I put a twin turbo Texas Speed LS in.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I feel like he simplified it. He simplified it. So more details.
More details.
A Texas Speed.
It has a 408 stroker. Precision twin turbos.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The packaging is very, very tight. Which comes with its own challenges, but was built to a specific aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then now we've put a daily dry sump system in it.
Mm-hmm.
What else did we do? Yeah.
Radiators in the back because of space.
Radiators in the back, so that comes with a whole host of challenges. Intercoolers up front. Now we're just trying to put a tune in it, but ultimately discovered that my current ECU is not capable of doing what I need it to do.
Okay.
So I have an LME intake with twin drive-by-wire throttle bodies. My ECU just doesn't want to play with it.
And are you allowed to say what ECU it is?
Yeah, it's an AEM Affinity, which is not the best. But at the time, they had reached out to sponsor us, so we used it. We gave it a try because it was the newest, latest, and greatest one they had at the time. And it's not, I don't think it's a bad ECU. It's just not capable of doing what I need it to do.
So when we went to the dyno, we had a really, really sort of world-renowned tuner.
What's his name?
On hand. And we'll get into that. But
okay, we'll get into that later.
He basically was talking about how the AEM Infinity is not a bad ECU in any regard at all. It's just there's lots of sort of...
It's actually not tunable enough.
Really?
Yes. Because it's built for sort of entry-level tuner, so it has a lot of fail-safes in it that you can't adjust those parameters. So my car worked just outside of those parameters, but because those parameters are hard set, we weren't able to move them. So once you get into a better quality, not a better quality, higher end, more tunable ECU, like an M-Tron or a Motec or a Haltech, any of these ones, you can... But that's outside of what is considered the safety zone. So AEM was making ECUs so that you couldn't really hurt your stuff. So it kind of built it in for people to try to learn and develop on their own. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Whereas these other ones, they'll let you do anything you want. And if you cook your stuff, you'll cook your stuff. So mine was like just a hair outside of that hard set, which would be fine. It's totally fine.
Yeah,
if you know what you're doing. But it wouldn't let us change it.
Yeah. I mean, because and really the only only major holdback that you had was because you had the twin drive-by wires.
Oh, okay.
But otherwise, outside of that, like every other feature in the AEM Infinity was tunable, and you could make tons of power with your engine turbo setup. Everything was great, and you could, sleep easy knowing that you had all the fail safes in place. But the situation was what it was, and Tim just needs a little bit more tunability. Sadly, the AEM Infinity has to come out of the car.
No.
Yeah. So if anybody doesn't really know, like, having a dyno day is not a cheap thing. It's a major event, and
you're paying whether you get your numbers or not, because you're paying for time and you're paying for the use of the machine. And a lot of times you're going to the dyno just to run your car and get a number. So there's a whole bunch of different levels to a dyno. You can go to the dyno, run your car, find out what your numbers are. It might cost you $200, $150.
Yeah, there's tons of dyno places out there in the world that'll just run your car to give you a sheet. This is your sheet. This is how much power.
And then you can take that data logging home and make your own adjustments. But in my instance, because my car is what it is, I had an opportunity to have, like, I guess he's in the top 10 tuners in the world. There's literally NDAs for the stuff that this guy's tuning, so we can't really discuss that part. But I'm paying him. I'm paying for the dyno time. So it's an expensive thing. So when I hear a lot of these people just, casually like, oh, you just got to do this and this and this. And it's like, I think that day was a $3,000 day. And I left without anything. I left with a bunch of information, knowing what I needed to correct. But when you're not leaving with that sheet, or you're not leaving with a hard part in your hand, it's like you feel like you're leaving with nothing. But in reality, I was given the solution to my problem, and that's what I was paying for. Just because it wasn't a positive solution and it's going to take even more money, it's like that's the reality of what it is. Because you're going to learn, and it's not necessarily ECU. When you're taking this and you've got this conglomeration of parts that you put together, you may learn that some of them just don't work well together.
Yeah.
And if you spent any time on a dyno or any time building cars, it's like you could either chase it and it's going to cost you a fortune, or you can correct the problem. So some people get hooked on, like, I want this giant turbo. Next thing you know, you're buying all this stuff to try to make that turbo work. And that's literally there's a car there.
I was going to tell you
while we were there.
That, yeah.
And that thing spiraled out of control. And then they had to bring this guy in multiple times so to continue to correct, because he decided he wanted this big giant thing. And then now it's just a money pit.
Yeah. Because that car
and then the worst thing is that car is being built for, I don't know, I can't remember the number, 1,500 or 2,000 horsepower. And when we left that day, I think it made 750. So that was, and
which
then,
is a lot of power still.
No, it
100%. But they corrected a couple things, and then boom, it made 1,000. But it's still not 2,000.
Yeah. When you add up the total cost of parts acquired for that particular project, 750 or 1,000 horsepower leaves you really, really disappointed. You're like, man, I'm like, that guy's heavily invested, not only financially but just time and like the anguish. Like, can you imagine he's so stressed. You could see it in his face.
When you have a high level tuner like that, it's like he can almost tell the problems you're going to have before it's even on the dyno.
Why, just by seeing the parts?
Just by seeing the parts.
Wow.
Like, oh, that's not going to play well together. No, like, we can make it work as best we can, but this is not optimal. So a big takeaway that I had from it was, this is a fucking hot setup. This is the only problem that we have. So I was like, whew, man, I'm in this deep. And I spent all this money building this stuff, and I just had somebody tell me, like, yes, this is gonna fucking rock.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So I was like, I had that as a takeaway. So okay, mechanically, I'm good. Everything's perfect, sorted. I just need to get a little more tunability. But that's invaluable, because what if I go do something and then melt down my $50,000 engine?
Yeah.
So you got to think of it as like, it's cheap. Like, in reality, it's cheap, because I wouldn't want some other person in there. Because I've had it where it's like, literally, the guy called me and is like, okay, I think I heard a little bit of a noise. So like, okay, we'll leave it then. And then it's like 20 minutes later, like we did one more pull and the thing's blown up.
Oh my God.
You're like, awesome. Thanks, man. Like that's a bad tuner. Like,
I think that especially like when choosing a tuner, like so I personally don't have a ton of experience, but like based on like logically, you should choose a tuner based on the merit of what they've accomplished. I mean, that goes without saying.
It's like anything. It's like back to our other topic. It's like you wouldn't do home renovations without checking references.
No.
Like, hey man, can I call one of your previous customers and see what their experience is like? You should do the exact same thing with a tuner. Because I always find that these tuners that are like, oh, this guy's, it's always their car. So they don't tell you how much, the infinite amount of time they have into their car to achieve this. Whereas you can't afford that, because when you're paying, it's like, I can't afford 100 hours of this guy's time for him to make, I got to get this done in a day.
Changes,
yeah. So.
Yeah. And you, like you said, like when you say you get a parts list of all your parts and your tuner looks at it and says, okay, based on this parts list and what I see here, as far as like the build quality, this is going to be excellent, or we're going to have some issues, and like a really, really good tuner will know right away, like, because you chose this thing right here and all these parts are not going to play very well together, or it's going to be awesome. You'll know. So
is it for the tuner, is it standard practice for them to ask you for a parts list?
Well, it depends what you're doing. So like this particular guy, 100% asked in advance, like, okay, what are we working on? But if you're just going to get a dyno sheet to see how much horsepower your car makes, then no, they just put it on, you sign the waiver, and it's like, we're going to send it. And then if it blows up, it's on you. But if you're trying to get it tuned, then they'll generally ask you in advance so that they know what they're dealing with when you get it there.
Yeah, anybody truly fucking capable or a professional is going to ask, like, the history of the engine, and like even like how often do you do your oil changes? What oil do you use? What is the life of this vehicle, this engine, and they'll know.
And what's your purpose
right away? Like what is your intention? Exactly.
You want to drive this thing around?
Oh, okay.
Do you want just peak power at full throttle?
Like we rarely tune things for peak power because it makes them undrivable half the time.
Yep.
And when you're sitting in traffic and pulling away from stoplights and all this kind of stuff, it's like this guy he tunes for all of that. And then if you want to tune for peak horsepower, that's a completely different tune. They're never the same. There's never like a street tune and the peak horsepower tune are never the same tune.
You can't have everything you want, like everything at once.
You can't, because it makes it undrivable.
Well, it's like a balancing beam, right? I mean, if you choose one thing more than the other, then there's going to be an out of balance. You go for peak power on the street, it's going to be undrivable.
You want torque versus horsepower versus like drivability versus like all of those things. Torque,
but that
horsepower.
comes down to a good tuner, because there's going to be parts that just won't be able to provide that
Exactly
at all. Like you put some giant turbo on it, and it's like this thing will never be streetable.
Yeah,
like it's it's either going to be a dog off the line and then be a light switch on the top end, or it's never going to work. So you have to be realistic in what your intended use is. So if you bring some big crazy billeted block giant turbo and it's like, I want to be able to drive this on the street, it's like, no, you're not going to be able to. It's going to overheat. It's going to be a dog off the bottom end. It's going to have all these inherent problems because of what you chose. But if you're like, hey, I want to go to the track and bang 9-second passes, 7-second passes, like, yeah, this is the setup. And then you need to find a tuner that can tell you that. And it's like this particular guy, not to keep going back to him, it's like, it's basic math. Like he knows all the math. It's like, oh, you're running this. Yep, you're going to make this much horsepower.
Even before it's
even on the dyno.
That's so
it's
cool.
Like, yeah, this thing should do 1,000, no problem. That's it.
Wow.
And it's like, you can't lie and you can't fudge it. You can't guess. It's like, oh man, I hope it's going to make 13. It's like, no, it will not make 13 based on these hard parts. And then you get these other guys, it's like, they're just trying stuff. It's like, run, try some stuff. It's like, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's just, there's levels to it. And then like a lot of these tunes that you can buy, again, are based on very specific parts. and then you know exactly what you can anticipate getting.
Yeah. And so, like, have you guys had a car blow up on the dyno? And what was that whole thing?
We haven't really had one blow up on the dyno. We've had mechanical failures. Like, we've had one spin rod bearings.
Isn't that blowing up, though?
It is technically blowing up, but it's not because it's like we haven't had
one of those dyno fail videos.
Oh, no, it wasn't like fireballs and everything. Okay.
Nothing cool.
No.
Okay.
We've never had anything blow up because of a bad setup. We've just had things have failed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
happens.
So, like, the rods and all of that stuff. So, like, what car was that? Was that on, like, a specific car? Or has it happened multiple times? And what kind of tuner did you have then? And did they tell you all of this stuff before
Well,
it
you
happened?
sign the waiver and you know. So
Okay,
it's
so
like,
what does the waiver include?
the waiver says we're going to send it, and if it blows up, it's on you. Like, you have to know that
Wow.
these things can happen, and then that they're not responsible if you got bad bearings. Like, they have no way of knowing.
Oh my god!
They can't look inside your engine and see what state it is. You might have a bottom end that's got 300,000 miles on it, and then you go put
I
a turbo
see.
kit on it, and you fucking blow the side out of it. It's could be for any number of reasons.
Right. I mean, like, this is the thing is like it's a slope that you have to sort of accept, and like unless you're gonna go with like a really current, lifespan oil analysis and do all that kind of stuff, be super tech, like, some guys might know how to read that information, but most people don't, and most of them don't even care. There's like, yeah, sign the waiver, man, we'll send it.
But if you start burning holes in pistons and stuff, that's tuning.
Really?
100% that's tuning.
Huh? But that's very interesting. Okay.
So that's when it's on them, but
'Cause
still.
I guess
you're taking
burning
a
holes in
chance.
pistons. That's like usually like too much of something.
Too little
yeah.
fuel,
Yeah.
lean
Yeah.
conditions.
It's yeah.
Yeah, too much, too little. Cause all kinds of problems.
So there's no one that you guys have met, or no tuner that you guys have met that would have a like warranty on if anything goes wrong. Really?
No.
No, I would say this last guy was probably the craziest because it was like he saw the tiniest indication of maybe there's a problem, and it was like, stop, let's check it.
Wow.
Not like, oh, well, let's see if it goes away. Because you find
sending
out
it
it
further.
didn't go away by blowing a hole in your piston or
I almost
something.
feel like we should probably tell the world who we're talking about.
Yeah, I know. I
Because
was
this
like,
guy
who
is
is
like,
this guy?
he's legit.
Well, he's one of the head tuners for Mtron.
Oh
So
shoot.
he helped actually develop the ECU.
That is so cool.
So, I mean, you're not going to get a better guy. Like, not only can he tune, he creates the tuner.
And if you guys do not know what is Mtron for people that might not know, because I didn't know who Mtron was until you told me.
Well, they're an ECU manufacturer as
Yeah.
well.
So just ECUs they make?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but their ECU is like more like race based. Like I
Okay.
wouldn't necessarily like you can use it in a street car, obviously, but it has enough ability for you to do all kinds of things. So
Yeah, and I think there's levels to it as well.
Yeah.
I feel like going back, if I recalling some of the conversations with this guy, I should probably say his name.
Yeah.
But like,
What's his name?
His name's Adrian.
Yeah.
He's a super cool guy, but so smart. It's mind blowing. Like he can rattle off things in a moment, and he just knows what's up. But like he was talking about how the Mtron, like it's like infinitely tunable, like infinitely. You can do
so awesome.
anything with it, and like it's like I think about like a conversation that I had with Steve, like race car wiring Steve.
Yep.
Because he's playing in that world of like super high power all the time. It's kind of his main thing. He talks about Mtron with reverence. Like he's like, this is the
Really?
shit. Like Motec has kind of like been the gold standard for so long, but it's very expensive. Most people don't need it or can't afford it because it comes with all kinds of other issues. Mtron is kind of like an entry point into that, it seems.
yeah,
And
still
they
not-
do a lot of like just absolutely amazing things with it.
Yeah.
The only reason I know Motec is from Fast and Furious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those were a
Motec
Motec
ECU.
exhaust system.
Oh,
they don't
exhaust
melt
system,
the
okay.
There's no Motec exhaust system.
I heard the name from.
fail.
I know.
I mean, we've been chasing like Motec since like way back in the day.
Yeah.
But it's just way more than what you need.
Yeah.
And so, like, what is the cost on some of these things? And is it worth it to Like, for example, so you can't go with the Holley Dominator?
No, I could.
Okay.
No, you can, and you
But
can.
the sort of the add-ons that you can get into with the M-Tron is like traction control and torque vectoring and all these other sort of aspects that you can add into that. Whereas with like the Terminator, it's a great ECU and it's super good, but it doesn't have the ability to do a lot of those things.
And I think that so the Holley Dominator is kind of like the
Dominator,
big brother, right?
yeah, the big brother.
It has
Terminator.
way more like sensor input sort of things and stuff. I'm not super well versed in this, but
Same.
like listening to Steve talk about it, I'm just like wide-eyed, like kid, like whoa, that's so cool. But like sounds like you could do a lot of things with a Holley Dominator. So no shit talking on it. We use Holley product.
We
quite
use
often,
Holley.
actually.
Yeah, there's Holley on the Euro.
The nice thing about a Holley is a lot of people can tune it. So like the M-Tron system is like a whole nother platform that you got to find somebody that's familiar with it.
Really?
So I think that's a topic that actually makes a lot of sense to talk about. I'm like choosing an ECU for your project vehicle. When you're that invested, make sure that you have access to a tuner that knows that ECU platform well. And if you do have access to one, then that's the one you should choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of elitism in tuning. Like
It's
a lot
true.
of guys only want to tune M-Tech or
Interesting.
Motec and these higher end ECUs, and then they don't want to touch any of these entry level sort of piggyback ones. They don't want anything to do with them. And then you got to find one that people want to tune or able to tune. So like Holleys, everybody knows how to tune a Holley. And I'd say the next is probably like Haltech people are familiar with. Motec is just so expensive that not a lot of people tune it.
Yeah, there's a big barrier to entry.
Yeah, so like that's the next level is like that's full on race car stuff. Because their ECUs are like $8,000, $10,000, $12,000.
Yeah,
US.
then you have install,
Oh my God.
and then you have the tuning part of it. Like, I mean, so you
Yes.
start adding up all of these costs. It's outside the realm of what is like realistic.
And
like,
generally
you don't
what's
need
needed,
that.
like you don't need it. You
don't
unless
need that.
you're like making finite adjustments to gain like tenths of a second. It's not really necessary. Plus, those guys are constantly tuning those things for different parameters, like weather conditions, track conditions, elevations, all this kind of stuff. So it's like you need that stuff.
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah, so it makes sense.
the amount of stuff that comes with it is like they got all kinds of like track telemetry, all kinds of stuff.
That is so cool.
So like that you can add into those systems, whereas you don't need that on the street. Like it's just unnecessary.
And I feel like a lot of the other manufacturers, ECU manufacturers, they're starting to come on board with like a lot of these
add-on
advancements in like making it more and more complex and more tunable, more data acquisition kind of stuff. It sounds like they're all coming on board. It's a thing that's accessible now.
And they're making it in modules. So you can evolve.
Oh, I see. Oh,
You can add
that's
things
cool.
in, whereas before it was like you had this
Fixed.
and then you had the Motec.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the separation was just too crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what it
like-
was like forever.
Yeah, because you're looking, you're like, oh, $2,000, that's not bad. What's an M-Tech? Like everyone's like, you should get a Motec.
Oh, gosh.
And you look and you're like, oh, yeah, no, I don't need a Motec. That's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah, but a lot of things have come a long ways. It always comes down to like who's gonna be using the product, and what the intention is. Like, I mean, we always talk about this. Like, what is the intention of your project?
Yeah.
You need to know that. That's important, fundamental of everything.
That's a very good point you mentioned, because like the who is using it, because you can still use the stock ECU of,
Yes, of course.
whatever you're doing. Like it's interesting because initially, like looking into ECUs, because I'm currently doing an LS swap, and looking into ECUs, there's just so much information out there, and you see so many people that are like, oh, you should buy like a Holley, or you should buy like what's it called, Motec or something, or Haltech. I think Holley and Haltech are like the ones that you get recommended the most. But in my use case, for example, I just want a car that I could drive around. Like it's going to be my daily driver. I'm not going to be taking it to the track. Maybe once in a while I might decide to do that, but probably not. But I don't think I need all of those things. And also budget, it was also a big part of it. So big. Yeah. And so I was like, I don't want to spend freaking even $2,000 for me. Like the Holly is pretty good, but at like $1,500, $2,000 US. But for me, I was like, it's kind of expensive.
If your setup isn't constantly changing, there's no need for a lot of those things. You can put a fixed tune in it, and it's great. You make a couple little changes. You can change your tune a bit, but I mean, the idea that we're all just driving around with the Honda with the laptop, and that laptop's always in the seat, and we're just constantly messing with it.
Yeah,
it's not reality.
No,
it's not a thing.
That's not a thing at all.
And so it is possible to get an overkill setup for your use case and all of that, depending on how you drive it. And so what I did was I was like, okay, I'm going to try to see if I can reuse the factory ECU. The only problem is if you're doing something like an engine swap, you need to figure out what you need, what you don't need, and repin all of that for the ECU, like all the connectors, everything. And so I did my research. Unfortunately, on the LS forums, there's what's it called? I think it's lt1swap.com.
There's a bunch of really good ones, actually.
Yeah, and this is just for one, but I know that even like you can get... there's a lot for different ECUs, or depending on if you're doing Ford or whatever. This is just for Chevy. And oh my gosh, it was so cool. Like it was a whole process, and you have to learn how to, access the ECU and get these different softwares and make what do they call it? Like a bench harness, and plug your ECU to the computer and like read it and like do all the things and do VATS deletes and all of that. But all the resources were out there. So I think for me, I would say, and I did it, and on my other LS Jag, I started it, or I was like, oh gosh, had fire extinguisher there just in case anything happens, because I don't know what I'm doing. Smart. I'm just following a guide online, and I flashed a tune into it, and it started off first try, and I was like, wow, crazy.
This is so easy.
I know. No,
so
it was
easy,
not.
You just had to
was not
completely
I know.
Learn a whole
new
it's
language. But it was like one of those experiences that it's valuable too. But I also didn't have the experience of like a tuner. So if anything went wrong, I would have no clue. And so I feel like that's where a tuner comes in. And so that's why, especially if you're doing any aftermarket parts, you might want to get the car tuned by someone that has done that before. Yeah. Because you can easily just go in there, even on the OEM ECU, and you can mess a lot of stuff up.
Well, the new stuff is tuned to such a high level now that there's not a massive amount of room in them. So it doesn't take much to hurt them. So it's like, you got to know what you're doing. Like, it's not a joke. Like, it's like, that's the final line of defense. It just and you will melt down a motor.
That's so insane. Because think about it. It's like, imagine if they they're just like, someone were to tell me, hey, go tune a carburetor. I have no clue how to tune a carburetor.
Yeah, but even tuning a carburetor, you can ruin a motor.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much. Like twist the screwdriver two times too many, and you got problems.
Yeah. But then think about the carburetor, because the carburetor is tuned for a certain purpose. And so that's why sometimes whenever you go into high altitude or something, you have to retune it because of the air fuel mixture and all that stuff. But an ECU has all of that built in, or supposedly should have all of that built, depending on what ECU you go for and what tune you have, but should be built in. And so think about all of those computations and the amount of stuff you have. And so if you don't know what you're doing, you could easily mess something up, and your motor is just going to go kaboom.
But you have to set all those parameters in too, as a starting point, so that it works within a range.
Yeah,
exactly.
So if you don't do that, and you go head up 4,000 feet, you'll have problems. It's trying to work within a range and make corrections. And if it doesn't have the plus minus there, you got probably it'll just shut down. That'll be it. So it's not like, and then that's where you get into a Motec, where you can start moving those set points and moving where it's working. And then that's why you need those crazy computers. But if you got your piggyback one that you did yourself, you might run out of tunability in there, not be able to adjust for those types of things.
Yeah, because I was curious initially. I'm like, why are people saying get an aftermarket ECU? Why don't you use the stock one? And so I hadn't found any of those limits. Like, I don't know, like, why. So, like, for example, like, why shouldn't I, or why would someone choose to get, yours is a different case scenario, but for something like mine, for example, Like,
Well,
why?
your stock ECU is not set up for boost.
Oh, okay.
So you start adding power adders and stuff, it doesn't know how to deal with it.
Oh, I see.
Then you got to start changing
I see.
sensors. So your MAF sensor's not big enough. You got to get, a 2-bar or 3-bar MAF sensor, all these sort of things, so that your computer can deal with the information that's being given with.
Oh.
So an ECU one was never intended, like a stock one was never intended really, like it'll play within a range, but unless you start making these other changes, it's going to run out of tunability.
Oh, that's so interesting. And then on your car, for example, why don't you go with the look is there, but why didn't you just go with a single throttle ball? Or is that too late since you already have the dual? You can't do a dual to a single or something like that? No?
I could, but I want the aesthetic of what I have. That's my setup. And yeah, that's it. There's no other reason. It's just, I love the way it looks.
Yeah.
And then now I'm going to make it work. So right now I'm kind of at the point where it's like, yes, I could buy a new snout for my intake. I could go to a single throttle body, but that's going to cost me how much?
Money to go
I got to
back,
change my whole setup. There's a whole bunch of plumbing and changes that would need to be made, or I can choose to change the ECU. So the price difference is probably, I wouldn't say it's still going to be more expensive for me to change my ECU, but it's not that much more. Because to buy that new snout and do all these things is still several thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And then I still have opportunity to sell my ECU.
Oh, true. Yeah, I guess it's still good. Yeah.
It's still good. It works perfect. Yeah. Buy another ECU. Luckily, I'm able to repin the ECU to my harness and reuse all those sensors. So it's not a complete loss. So I'm not rewiring the whole car. I can repin the plugs, put a new ECU in, and retain everything that I wanted. So, yeah. But at the time, I asked them based on my setup, and they said it would be able to do it, and it's not able to do it.
Yeah.
So that's the only downfall to me.
Yeah, but I remember like looking at in the software there, it shows twin throttle body.
Really? Oh, it does have
It has an entire wizard to allow you to calibrate it.
Oh,
it just,
okay.
The differentiation between the two, because I'm running 103s, a pair of them, it just slightly...
When you say 103 millimeters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it only just slightly goes out of what AEM has put in as a hard set point as a differentiation to put it into limp mode. Oh. And the problem is we could cheat it and make them both act as one.
Yeah.
But if one fails in some way,
that's
go
not
to the
good.
fucking
That's
moon and
not
I'm
good.
dead.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want that. So it's like, it's not worth bypassing that. We just need to open those values up a little bit, because these are big throttle bodies, and the amount that we're talking, the differentiation is very slight. So it's like, if we create them as one and one does fail, I could have a full throttle scenario. And I don't need that.
Not be good.
No. So the plan of action, the parts choice and everything, the aesthetic was all set, and now we just have to find a way to make that work. So,
and even ultimately in my situation, it's once I set this thing, I'm going to have more power than I would ever know what to do with. So it's not like I'm going to be actively tuning this thing all the time. So it's unnecessary, really. But you get it in your head that you need these things, and you just need these things. Like, I want to know that if I am going to make changes, I'm future-proofed.
You're not limited, exactly.
And I can do anything I want.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason why I'd go to a different ECU. I could put a Terminator Max in, and with my setup, I'd have no problem.
Because AEM, something I heard, and to let me know if I'm wrong, but are they out of business, or like what happened with AEM?
Producing ECMs and ECUs.
So they just don't support it anymore?
No.
That's so interesting. But they're still a company, though.
Yeah, AEM is like...
Well, they were bought out by Holley.
Oh,
so that's why they shut down the ECU part of it, because Holley already has their Terminator and Dominator platform.
Yeah, and so the AEM itself is like more focused on the EV stuff now.
I mean, that's cool, but that's also dumb on Holley's part, I think, because
there's really no difference, because those are both very capable ECUs.
No, because I mean, they already have a customer base, and they have you could own multiple companies and still support both sides, and you still get revenue from both sides, because now No one is gonna buy AEM that's not EV. I mean, AEM EV, yeah, they're awesome, but like AEM, the regular ECU part for ICE engines, no one is gonna. So I feel like Holley is not. I don't know. That's not.
There's got to be numbers behind it.
It sucks, but like from manufacturing perspective, it's less things that they have to focus on creating.
That is true.
So I mean, there's sense in it from both ways.
And there's a replacement. So it's like, we don't make this anymore, but we have this that you could use. And it's of a similar price point. It's actually cheaper, I think.
The AEM,
the Holley Terminator and Dominator.
Yeah, it's cheaper than the AEM.
Yeah, because actually the AEM was
quite expensive.
It's a pretty pricey ECU. But
so it's not like they don't have a product to replace it that's just as capable and is actually a cheaper part.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm still not convinced. I'm like, it's business. Again, maybe I might be wrong because I don't see the numbers on things. It's like when Ford decided to stop making SUV or cars, like regular cars, and now they only just produce SUVs in North America. And I'm like, why would they do that? But apparently
that's what numbers people are buying. It's
numbers and business and things.
I don't think people running standalones is near as common as the internet makes it seem.
It seems like everyone
has one. Yeah,
but I mean, just to get an ECU wired from scratch is going to cost you several thousands of dollars and a bunch of time. So it's not just buying a standalone; it's the wiring, getting a nice harness, getting your standalone tuned.
Yeah,
by the time you're done, it's like there's more into just putting a standalone in than most people have in their whole car.
Yeah.
So it's not a cheap or common thing. How many people do you know that have standalones?
Not a lot, actually.
Yeah, probably 2. And I know 2.
Yeah.
And you probably know 2. Other than that, it's not like, aside from like a lot of these resto mod builds that are running Terminators, it's not like guys, I don't know a lot. I know, like 2 guys that are like actively tuning, building big power cars. That's it. Everybody else is just running stock ECMs with tunes in them because the new ECUs are amazing in cars.
Yeah, and they're still reliable because I had a friend of mine that actually had the standalone. She uses Holley. She has a really cool car, but I was chatting with her and she was like, oh yeah, like this ECU is cool. And then I met up with her at an autocross afterwards. And then she was like, if she had known what she knows now, she would probably just have gone
the stock
OEM stock because OEM, according to her, I didn't understand it at the time, and I still don't maybe understand what she said, but she said that the OEM one has so many more things that you can do like the Holley is very specific. It's more specific than the OEM. The OEM has a lot more, not tunes, but it has a lot more. I forgot the word she used, but anyhow, she does autocross even and actually uses her car. But she was like, like if she had known, she would have just gone for the stock or the OEM ECU. But she was already so deep into it and she had rewired the whole car and all of that. And so she was like, I'm probably not going to, but because of I'm so deep into this part of things.
It's getting a lot more common now. You're seeing a lot more people investing money into stock ECUs.
So I
mean, because they're awesome. Like
how can
you get some of these units from like Bosch and all these guys, like they put an amazing amount of money into
millions of dollars,
just the capabilities of the unit, not necessarily the tunes, but what it's actually able to do. And you can't reproduce that for a couple $1,000.
No.
That's why a lot of these crazy tuning companies are building tunes and add-ons to those ECUs because they're so good.
Like piggybacks almost?
And working with what's in there already.
Yeah, the capability and like the processing speed of all of these things. Like I don't know enough about this stuff to talk too much about it, but like I remember hearing some conversations about like processing speed and how fast they can compute these things. Like you just can't compete. Like OEM is they've invested like just staggering amounts of money in developing these things.
You can't compete with that. They've been developing fuel injection since like the 80s.
Yeah,
it's like 40 years of development, and you think you're going to come out with an ECU just that's going to compete, you can't.
So you get into like the aftermarket stuff, and it's like you're saying, like how she's describing, like I wish I would have just stuck with OEM, because like the balance is more shifted into being more like it's more laser focused in the standalone one compared to OEM. It's,
Plus you have something that was developed specifically for that vehicle.
Yeah.
So everything else kind of is being compromised.
That's true.
Not everything, but like some other things might be compromised because of that one choice.
Yeah. And so what ECU did you decide to go with? Have you decided yet?
Not really. That's one of those things. Like, it's a deep dive.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, I'd love to go with the M-Tron, but I just don't know if I need it or not.
Yeah.
So I'm still kind of like, I got to figure out what my intent for the car is. So I want to make some changes to the car. So maybe I need to go that way? And just basically, more probably I will go with the M-Tron just because of the torque management aspect of it. And because of just the ridiculous amount of horsepower my car does have, I don't want it to be undrivable. So to be able to make it properly drivable with that level of horsepower, I almost have to go with an M-Tron or a Motec just to make it drivable.
And based on our experience talking with Adrian about it, it just makes it seem like it makes so much sense. I mean, we're kind of the mindset where we don't want things to have failures. We want to make sure that, like, when it's set, you can almost forget about it. So that's kind of
the torque management part of it is a really big thing for me.
Yeah, you don't want to die.
Well, you don't want to die, and you want it to be fun.
Yeah, you don't want to be terrified you kind of do, but not every time.
Well, you want it to be terrifying when you want it to be.
Exactly.
And that's another thing. A lot of these ECUs now give you opportunity to put multiple tunes in without having to tune it.
Yeah.
Like, you can put the tunes in and you can toggle through the tunes based on your current needs.
That's pretty awesome.
Rather than this laptop in the driver's passenger seat trying to,
load
I got to
tunes
stop.
on the fly.
Got to load a different tune in.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to do that. That's not reality. Like, we've progressed way beyond that. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the step ups from like an OEM flash type situation, right? If you do decide to commit to aftermarket and you go that route, like you said, you can have multiple tunes for multiple situations and multiple levels of.
I feel like
times
this
fun.
conversation is going to get dismissed because we're talking about these upper end thing. Like, that whole laptop Honda thing is awesome. Like, do it. Because it's a learning curve, and you need to learn and understand exactly what you're doing. And right away, that will give you all the information to tell you if what you're doing is right. So it's a progression. Like, we've done all those things, piggybacks, tunes, all that kind of stuff, mess with all that stuff, and it's like, it's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, there's lots of like relatively inexpensive ones out there. Like, one of our coworkers back in the day, he got really, really, intimate with playing around with Megasquirt. Like,
I forgot about Megasquirt.
It's relatively inexpensive and it works. It does all the things. The only thing is that you have to learn the terminology and everything of all of those things.
He was changing little things, and it's like, hey, how'd your tune go? Well, I changed two things, and I sat on the side of the road for an hour and a half figuring out what I did because my car wouldn't start.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So you have to be of a mentality, right, to want to do that. Like, and so like a lot of the times we always circle back because we're a business. We don't got time to do that. We don't want to do that.
Because it's crazy. You'll open it and it'll ask you. You're like, I don't even know what that is. And it's there's a menu this long of all.
Oh my gosh,
like,
all the parameters.
So I have
things.
a huge amount of respect for tuners. Like a huge amount, because when you get into the upper end and you're making finite adjustments to make an actual, like, a really killer tune, it's a massive amount.
Yeah, the sky is the limit.
It's so much information, and knowing what that information is, because you're not just tuning, moving things around. Like, there's so many things. Like, half the stuff, like, you got to be able to set up all your stuff before you can even start tuning, and half the time you don't even know what that means. It's like ohm ratings and impedance and all this kind of stuff, and like setting up sensors, and it's a lot, man.
So you got to be pretty smart. Like you got to be a pretty intelligent person to like deep dive into tuning and the world of tuning. Like, I respect those people, man.
And if you're interested,
it's a thing.
in it too. I was going to talk about like HPA, Horsepower Academy.
Yeah.
They have a lot of videos on, or like resources on, if you want to learn how to tune your car with no experience, and they offer some really cool resources. Actually, they have really good deals. I think around this like holiday time, they have some really good deals. And so
most people listening or watching probably knows of HPA, like High Performance Academy.
Yeah.
But if you don't, they're online like learning.
We're not being paid by that.
No, we're not.
It's just a resource.
We just respect. Like I listen to their podcast all the time, and I've watched a lot of their videos. They're great. So
and there's lots of simulators now, and a lot of these ECUs will have simulators, so you can almost make changes based on data that you've collected, and then run a simulation.
So
it'll tell you. So like that's probably saved an immense amount of parts. So like, I mean, there's lots of ways to get into it, but I mean, we kind of went off the whole dyno thing, but the dyno thing, just to get back to it really quickly, it will expose any weaknesses you have. It'll tell you where your heat's being built up. It'll like right away you'll be burning hoses and this and that. Oh, I got to move this, I got to move that, and it's like hot spots. All these kind of things like will be exposed on the dyno, and it is not a good time.
No, because I remember telling, or when we were getting the Evo into the trailer, I was like, oh, sweet, dyno day. This is going to be so much fun, because my perception on YouTube has always been, oh, you just go there, you make power, and everyone is like, 1,000 horsepower.
A couple of clicks on the laptop, and you're just making power every run.
And Tim was so stressed. He was like, I'm not I'm not optimistic about this.
No, because you'll find leaks, you'll find all kinds of little things. Like it would, because you're stress testing your car. And it will expose all of the weaknesses.
I mean, you try to do diligence by like running your car through heat cycles and everything long before you ever go to a dyno, so that you can find all those things, right? But like, I mean,
you will have a dyno checklist.
If you're like, oh shit, I'm building my project, but I have a dyno scheduled, and maybe it was the only day that you had available to have that tuner available, to have that slot on the dyno available, and you had to like push yourself to like achieve, that deadline.
You better be ready to answer the questions.
When you show up at the dyno, like you're hoping and praying that like you don't have any leaks, you don't have any problems,
your engine doesn't blow up.
But hopefully you don't run into that situation. You've managed to like heat cycle it and find out like all the things. Make sure you got extra plugs. Change your oil.
As you get there, it's like, what spark plug heat range are you running? What do you have them gapped at? What is this? And you're like,
I don't know.
What's your fuel pressure at? What's this at? What's that? Like, what size pumps are you running? Like, all these things so that they know what they're working in. So there's a lot to it. It's not just showing up and making horsepower. Like, I'll bet you for every one of those crazy horsepower videos, there's 10 dyno sessions. Like, call me out. Tell me you banged it out the first time.
No.
And I will call you a liar.
No.
So for every one of those 1,000 wheel horsepower dyno polls that we watch, which we all love, which is why we do it, there's probably 10 sessions before that.
Adjust. And
then a lot of times you'll find out other weaknesses. It's not just engine stuff. You might drop a rear end or wipe out bearings or twist a drive shaft. There's all kinds of things that can happen. You will find all the weak points. If you're chasing that. But a lot of times we'll just do like, hey, we want a nice drivable street tune. And then we've seen the difference between what is a nice driving car and peak horsepower can be like 100 horsepower. So it's like, this car is amazing to drive. And then you don't even really notice the difference, to be honest. Like 100 is a lot, but it's a much more pleasant car to drive. And a lot of times you're not giving up a huge amount. You're not feeling it in the seat of your pants anyway. So chasing that extra 30 horsepower and having a bad driving experience is not worth it.
Because even I'm looking back to the Chevelle that we went to go like.
It didn't even make it on the dyno.
No, that was just a tune.
Yeah, he drove it around the neighborhood.
Crazy.
Put a tune in it, and the thing. That guy's over the moon with it.
Crazy, because I literally remember what it felt like before the tune and after. If you don't know, it was like a Crate LS that we got on the Chevelle that we built. And so the before and the after was mind blowing, because I was like, oh yeah, it feels nice. Like the power band feels good and all that. And then after Jay got it tuned and you drove it later, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so much smoother.
The coolest thing about the thing is like when they do tickle the keys and you hear it.
The engine, the idle, yeah. You know something is happening.
But the dyno will hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Like, everybody that does like the guy math, it's like, oh, this is good for 25, this is good for 40, this is good for 15, so I have 550 horsepower. And then you go there and it's like you got 318. And it's like a kick in the nuts.
If it doesn't blow up.
If it doesn't blow up. So generally, I'd say your first dyno visit, if you've done a build and used a bunch of aftermarket parts, you're probably going to get sent home without a number.
Yeah.
They're like, go home, correct these things, and then come back.
And you pay for that time too. So
I think that's probably pretty safe to imagine.
So I would put that in your process. Like, hey, we're going to take this there, find out where we got weak points, and then we'll come back for horsepower.
Yeah. And with that said, I think that's it. Anything else you guys want to add?
No.
Sweet. If you like this video,
if
like this podcast,
are into S&M, hit up a dyno.
What's S&M?
It's okay.
Elvis.
Okay.
You're so pure.
S&M? I have to Google it. Let me see. No, maybe I'll do it later.
Google it.
Let Elvis know
I'm
what
kind of
S&M
scared now.
means.
I'm kind of scared. Is that I don't know. I'm trying to remember. If you know what S&M is, let me know.
Yeah, put it in the comments.
Oh gosh, I'm kind of scared now.
Make up your own. Let's hear it.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of acronyms. Sweet music. I don't know. If you're into sweet music,
It's people that like to give pain and people that like to receive pain.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Oh, interesting.
That's it.
There's usually a lot of leather involved and leashes.
That is a very different podcast.
That's it. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.